Welcome in, everybody, to the Two for Talking podcast. I'm your host, Corey Tusick. I have comedian Joe Bartnick and writer and scribe for The Athletic, Josh Yohe, here as always. And we're doing some more summer programming. I think it was a big hit last week. People really enjoyed it. I had multiple people mention to me how they enjoyed the episode. So, guys, we'll get right into it. This first segment, we're going to talk about favorite Penguins, not best Penguins, but top 20 favorite Penguins, just personal preference. And I think we can assume 1 through 4 is probably the same for everybody. Is that correct? Or should we go around the horn and see where we land?
Well, I think, first of all, I think this is much harder than I remember doing it like 5 years ago. It's basically, I only don't like 5 people that ever wore the Penguins uniforms. And we know Brassard, Winnick, and a couple others. So, it's and I absolutely love at least 50 to 60 of these guys. And then trying to rank them is damn impossible. I don't know what you guys thought, but it's like you're just splitting hairs. Even I think ranking the top 4, which I don't assume, is Mount Rushmore. It cannot be. Everyone has their favorites, but it's like, obviously Mario's number 1, maybe, but but it's like, I love Jágr so much. It's almost like your dad and your favorite uncle. It's like you love your dad, but your favorite uncle is the coolest. Or it's like your wife and your mistress. You love your wife, but your mistress is the coolest. Like I don't
Yags is a great mistress. That's fair.
and then it's like, how do you put? Yeah, I'll just say mine. I'm sorry to take the time. I go 66, 68, 87, 71. But I'll tell you something. It's like, how could I put anybody? How could Sid not be number 2? I don't know. I mean, Sid's done everything for me in my life. I literally, what would Sid do? He leads my life. But I just love Yags is on my Christmas tree. I just love you. I mean, I don't know. I didn't rank these. And there's moments when I love Gino more than everybody. So it's hard to say. Anyway, I'll let you guys go. I took up a minute.
No, I think that's the correct list. I actually wrote one time in an article that Jágr is kind of the bad boy prince of Penguins history. He's royalty. He's the one you'd want to go party with for a night, right? Because he's just, there's always just something a little different about him. That he still has that lore about him even now, in fact. But yeah, that's the Mount Rushmore. We're not gonna, include those 4 with the rest of the list, I think, because they are not only the 4 greatest players in franchise history, but you'll never really hear a bad word about any of them. They're all unique. They're all quirky in their own way. But yeah, they're kind of in their own little category, I think, when you're talking about this list, right?
Yeah. That's what I kind of figured. Since we're not ranking, so just so everybody's clear, we're not saying, the first one we mentioned is the best, but you might as well we know that those 4 are going to be on there. And we talk about them enough. I mean, you could talk about them more all the time, but yeah, you really can't go wrong with those 4. Like you said, it is Mount Rushmore. I think we should carve them into Mount Washington. At some point, people were saying we should get a Hollywood sign, and I'm like, no, we shouldn't get a Hollywood sign. That's Hollywood's thing. Let's do something with Pittsburgh. So carve Roberto Clemente's face into the have Nico Green, like have him like carved in so that you're coming out of his mouth whenever you come out of the Fort Pitt Tunnel or something.
That's the biggest debate. That would be the biggest debate. That'd be bigger than Lincoln and whoever and and Biden and I mean, that'd be like Roberto, Mario, Mean Joe, and then who's the next? That the 4th one it would cause a civil war.
Yeah, I mean, and you're like right off the top, Sid and Ben, like
right, Franco. I mean,
yeah,
Lambert. It's like
Art Rooney, if you want to include, figures in sports, right?
Yeah, it's
Bruno.
Does Arnold Palmer count, or is Latrobe its own entity? I don't know, but
yeah, it's.
Okay, so yeah, well, the rest of the list outside of Mario, Jágr, Sid, and Gino, the next one I have on my list is.
I just say one thing. So it would have been easier if I could have picked 20. Now I only have 16 because it would have been easier if I would have had it 20 if I threw the first 4 out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We should have done that because now it's just the other 16. But I got the great Marc-Andre Fleury. obviously what he did for the franchise, can never be replaced. But we could talk about it. But his personality was fantastic. He just was it was fun to see him on the ice, the way he played. And I'll never forget his first game against the Kings. I was at the game and watching how quick his legs were and how quick he was from side to side. I'll never forget that. And it just kind of was stored away in my mind. And then I remember in 2009 when that puck came out to Lidstrom and he was sliding over, and I was like, it like connected to that first game, and I knew, I was like, he's got this. He's fastest side to side. But I love Fleury. Everybody loves Flower.
I was at that game too. Didn't he have like 50 saves and lost 2-1?
Oh yeah,
like
stop the penalty shot, right?
It was just like, oh my god, we finally got a goal. It's like been 40 years, we finally got a goaltender.
And he is, I have the pleasure of knowing him really well. He is literally one of my favorite people on planet Earth. You will never meet anyone who knows him that doesn't like him. He is the happiest human being you will ever meet. He is the funniest human being. I have nothing but good things to say about him. Every time I walk into that locker room to this day, I still miss him. And I always tell the story. They always have locker room clean out day at the end of the season, whether they win the cup or don't make the playoffs, whatever. They always have it. And after the 16-17 season, you always say, hey, guy, have a good summer. Hey, Sid, have a good summer. Like everyone always goes up to say hi to Sid because he's so cooperative with the media. We all love him, right? Flowers' last day in that locker room after they won the cup in 17 was a couple of days later. I shit you not, there was a line of 25 reporters all lined up just to shake his hand one by one to say goodbye because we knew he was gone. And I've never seen anything quite like that. And we all just stood there very patiently and waited and had a word with him. I had to be selfish and give him a hug. I'm like, come here, give me a hug. He was the greatest guy to deal with. And get your tickets now. I think it's October 29th. Minnesota comes to town. Last time he'll ever play in Pittsburgh. That will be a really big night.
Yeah, and I hope he plays because I know
he doesn't like playing here. I know,
and I don't blame him. I mean, they like your best friends who got used to picking you apart in practice. Like it's I love Flower and couldn't say enough nice things. And I always thought too. I remember I think you might have told me that, Josh, that long line. And I thought about it afterwards. I thought, what if Jim Rutherford had done like some kind of last minute trade and he traded Murray and kept Murray? Then it would have been that awkward moment where you all said goodbye. And then
and in retrospect, he should have. Now, no GM in the league at the time would have traded the guy who was 10 years younger, making less money. I always think about, though, in an alternate reality, if you traded Matt Murray right after he won 2 cups when he was like 22, 23 years old, what would the return have been? You could have gotten somebody's entire farm system for him and still had Fleury in his prime for the next 5 years. Things might be a little bit different right now. We didn't know how the next few years would go for Murray and Fleury. But, don't forget about how great Fleury was all those years, even when they weren't winning cups. He was so durable. He'd play 60 games a year. Almost automatic in shootouts, would get you all those extra points. He was incredible.
That was the biggest thing about Murray Fleury. And I said it at the time. I'm on record at the time. I understand that Murray's won 2 cups, and I love him for that. And Muzz was a great guy. I didn't know him personally. He's just like a nice kid.
He is, yeah.
But playing 60 and winning 40 every year is not the easiest thing in the world to do.
No, it's not.
I mean, and Fleury did it like no big deal.
No, we took it
for over a decade.
I think we took it for granted in the end that he'll be healthy and he'll win 40 games. Like that's not an easy thing to do. I don't care how good the team is in front of you.
I mean, like there's like 5 people every season that do it, and that's it. He did it for 15 straight years.
Oh yeah, he was, and not many goaltenders are have that superstar charisma that he has. You just, even when, just so athletic and so fun watching him play, and he's always, patting the crossbar when it saves him, stuff like that. I mean, he is one of the few goalies who's worth the price of admission just to watch him. Even when he would give up goals, it would be so theatrical and entertaining. Like, I mean, everything about the guy was worth watching.
Yeah, for some reason too, and a lot of, I mean, it's not revisionist history. A lot of people had tried to run him out of town. You know, he had some down playoffs, and he wasn't, you know,
Sure.
Saint Flurry the whole time. But something about him, I just never didn't like. He was always my guy. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As far as like, you know, I never was on the get rid of Flurry stance in those in between years when the few people we will remain nameless, who I'm sure will listen, they know who they are. Who's number 5 for you, Josh?
You know what? Flower was on my list, I should add. He was very high on my, I think I had him like number 8. Number 5 for me, though, and I know he's on both of your lists, I'm sure, is the RT Express, Kevin Stevens, who was not only one of the great players in franchise history, but you talk about a character. Now, he has evolved into a guy who's had so many issues off the ice with addiction, and how he literally like goes around the country speaking to people and helping people with addiction. It's just a great guy. But back in the day in the 90s, he was not only a great player, but he was the voice of that team. You know, Mario was the captain. He was a quiet guy. Ronnie Francis was kind of the captain and, you know, the second in line. He was a quiet guy too. And then there was Artie just running his mouth constantly on the ice, off the ice, making predictions. They were not the Penguins without him. And he just, I go back to my childhood and I think about, you know, when you're a little kid growing up watching Mario, that's everybody's favorite player. But you always had to have that next guy that was like your personal favorite player other than Mario. For me as a kid, it was Artie. I mean, everything about the guy was great.
That's so funny. Great minds think alike. That's my. It is an extremely tough choice because to me, after the big 4, then to me there's like who's 5th. To me, then it's in between. I have Stevens 5. I got Captain Ron 6, and I got the Flower 7. To me, either any of those could be 5. I'm not going to argue. Put a big debate up. Stevens, he was our first homegrown Penguin. Mario, he was divine, whatever they say with Mary Jesus, whatever that word, the Immaculate Conception, like that. You know, yeah. Stevens was the first like regular human that was a Penguin, that was like our Penguin, that was like a badass. He took on the Bruins. He took on everybody. You guys know how much I love power forwards. He was the best power forward for like 4 or 5 years. I mean, 50 goals, 200 PIMs. Nobody was a badder ass than Kevin Stevens. I freaking love Kevin. I mean, I just love Stevens. I mean, when we interview him, I'm thinking about flying in just like but then, okay, so we talked about it. So then I got to say my number 6, my man, he's the sweater is my UN ambassadorship. I wear it around the world. I mean, no one better than Captain Ron. And if maybe he wasn't, you know, like a Carolina legend, that he might even be higher, because everything about Captain Ron, never made a bad play, never did anything wrong. The perfect assist, the perfect everything. You know, he comes, we win 2 cups. I just love Captain Ron.
I love him in number 9 too.
I have the rare when Mario was off a year. I have the Ronnie with the C.
Oh yeah, that was 94, 95, right?
Very nice.
Yeah, the only thing that stinks, it's the effeminate pigeon logo. That's the only thing that stinks.
Now, Ronnie, I always feel like you always like you have your group of friends, right? And there's like the one friend that's the adult in the room. When I first started working at the Athletic, we had the whole Pittsburgh crew, and Steven Nesbitt's a great baseball writer. He lives in Boston now. We were having a little party. It was a birthday. I think it was Mark Cabale and Sean Gentili both have birthdays in January. So we were having a little birthday party with cake. And a minute after we had our cake, Steven's walking around picking up the plates and napkins and throwing them away. I was like, wow, like, thanks, Mom. Okay. Like, geez, that was Ronnie Francis. He's the adult in the room, the one you could always trust to make good decisions. You know, if you probably had problems off the ice, you would go to Ron and he would set you straight. He's just an incredibly smart guy. Remember Ronnie? He would always argue with referees nonstop, and you could always tell he knew the rule book more than they did. Like he was never demonstrative. He would just very quietly pull Kerry Fraser aside, and I'm sure he was explaining, actually, this is why you were wrong. This is the rule. Because Ronnie was smarter than everyone. He did his homework more than anyone. Probably one of the most underrated players ever. You look at his numbers. I don't know where he is on the all-time point list. I know he's somewhere in the top 10, right? And he was really a defensive specialist, though. Think about that. Who also is maybe the best face-off guy in the league. I mean, he was a great, great hockey player and a very likable man.
He retired like second or third all time in points.
Right.
And now kids watching now, there never used to be the red lines to line up on face-offs. They were all spray painted in because Ronnie Francis won every draw. And they would always consider him cheating. So they put you got to put your feet here and here. And Ronnie was so good at face-offs that he had a system. He only pulled out his best stuff in his own zone.
That's right.
He'd win. It's center ice.
He was the innovator. He would just tie your stick up and use his foot to kick it back. He had all kinds of little tricks. He was unbelievably good at it. He, of course, won the face-off in the famous Mario goal against Chicago in Game 1. He also scored one of the most important goals in Penguins history. I think he had a hat trick that game, the Rangers Game 4, when Mario was out with the broken hand. He beat Mike Richter from the blue line, then stripped Messier and ended up scoring the overtime game winner. He just a giant in Penguin history, and one of those people. I've literally never heard a bad word about him from anybody everybody loves Ron Francis.
I mean, literally, that's why he's forever. Because that was like, that was whenever I hated the Rangers as much as I hated the Flyers.
Oh yeah,
and then Ronnie saved us. Like that. I mean, I still do. Mike Lang's call and the New York Rangers. Bye.
The Elvis and the New York
Rangers have just left the building.
You know what? Both Staggy and Mike Lang have told me the story when the Penguins eliminated the Rangers in '92. It's the only time they ever did it. Mike Lang actually stood up and applauded the Penguins when the game was over. He's never done stuff like that. The whole city hated those Rangers so much. And they don't win that series. They don't win that series without Ron. They absolutely don't. And we'll never know. We'll never know if they beat Florida with him in '96. I kind of think they do.
I think they beat him. I think Colorado is a different animal, though.
Probably. I would agree with that. Although
I felt no good after Ronnie got hurt that season. I'm like, that's not good.
No, he did. So that team didn't like to play defense. So he was kind of, like I said, he was the adult in the room. All right, I will back check since nobody else will. And he was so good at
it. And such the ultimate defensive presence, as well as being, third all-time points, right fifth now, that he's like the first forward I ever remember playing the point on the power play on any team.
It wasn't really a thing then. That's right.
No one did it.
Yeah. He would always be on the left point, and man, did he do it well. I mean, he really did.
I used him there on PlayStation 94 as well.
With Ron Francis, I remember the great Mike Lang when I was in college. Just let me do a little job shadowing with him one time. And there was a pregame skate, morning skate with the Hurricanes, and I had the pleasure of, I forget his name, but the longtime broadcaster for the Hurricanes came walking up and sat next to Mike and I, and just to hear those two talk, because he was with them in Hartford way back, and they were just talking, and I asked them both. I said, "All right, so who's your favorite player?" Like, I got to ask that question, and they both looked at each other like they knew what they were going to say, and they said, "We've covered a lot of great players, but nobody beats Ronnie." So yeah, he was a great player. Everybody loved him. Next on my list is Sergei Gonchar, which he had a relatively brutal first year, at least first half of his first year here. People were booing him whenever he had the puck. It got pretty bad for him, and then he turned it around, we don't win those cup. We don't win the 2009 cup with them. And also, we've talked about him coaching. We don't win 16, 17 without him as a coach.
We need him now. I can't believe we let him go. To me, he's a big piece of why Gino goes off the reservation and why the power play stinks. I've been calling for that for 2 years.
Well, and speaking of adults in the room, Sergei Gonchar, another, seriously, like, he was so important for Malkin and for Sid, I think. I really do. And I very seldom criticize Sid for anything because Sid's pretty much the perfect human. I always thought he should have given the cup to Sergei Gonchar in Detroit. And with all due respect to Billy Guerin, who I love, Billy had already won the cup. And, Gonchar had never won a cup before, had been through so much in his career. Unbelievable human being. And don't forget, in that Washington series, he was playing on one leg. Ovechkin cheap shotted him. I think it was game 4. He hurt his knee, and he came back and played anyway. Set up the first goal in Game 7 on the deflection to Sid. Gonchar, a great all-time Penguin, no question. He had the bad first year. He really rebounded. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame, and he's not. I think he'll get in someday. He's another classic case. If he were from Sudbury, Ontario, I promise you he'd be in the Hall of Fame. But he is a true gentleman, and also one heck of a coach. I don't think anybody would dismiss that. I've had a number of Penguins tell me, Ian Cole and Justin Schultz both told me back in 16 and 17, like, if we didn't have Sarge, we wouldn't win Stanley Cups. Like, he's actually that important to our blue line and makes us all that much better. That's a great choice.
Oh, I got Sarge at 12, and that's and I mean I love Sarge. And two things that you'll never replace. That just very, very, very few people walk the blue line.
Oh,
like Gonchar, just beautiful. Just, I mean, people say, "Oh, look at Adam Fox." Adam Fox can't hold Sergei Gonchar's jockstrap when it comes to walking the line. And the other thing, no one still puts the puck on the platter for Chino like Gonchar ever did. No, to this day, they never found somebody that could do it. They still can't.
No, and Gonchar was so important on that power play. He did not defer to the big boys. When he had an open look, he took it. He understood how to handle, I think, superstars and their egos. Whereas to this day, Chris Letang will force them the puck when they want the puck, right? Gonchar never did that. He also never missed the net, which I appreciated. He just an unbelievable power play quarterback. Yep. He was fun to watch, and just much like Francis, such of a gentleman. Just a classic guy.
It's a sin he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Oh,
really
I think
is.
so too.
It really is. It's a sin. It's just pathetic. I don't even know. Canada for sure. Maybe a little bit of a bigger market. I don't know, but it's he's so much better than a lot of guys.
Oh.
I'll give you my number 8. Highest ranking now. Now we're into the new era, I guess. But everyone who knows me knows the Rusty Razor. I just love Rusty. Rusty's my boy. I'll never buy his sweater because I just don't want to jinx it because I know that'll be the day they trade him. But he's my guy. I think he'll be the next captain. You gotta love a guy whose nickname is Mr. Elimination. That's and he's a hard worker, and I met him, and he's super nice. His favorite snack is peanut M&M's. Steve Burns, like, how do you know that? Like, I'm a stalker.
That's wild. Wow.
I just love the Rusty Razor. I just love the Rusty Razor. I love him. He's the I love him. Something
about him. This has nothing to do with him as a hockey player. Something from my standpoint that's interesting. A lot of players don't like dealing with the media. Some, Phil Kessel, just would refuse to do it. Brian Rust. And he's talked openly about this, otherwise I wouldn't mention it. He has a speech impediment, okay? He has a stutter. And that's like, I would think a very difficult thing in general to have. And when you're dealing with reporters and doing interviews every day, I would think, I don't know what the right word, if it's embarrassing or if it's uncomfortable. A lot of people just would not do it. And we would never bug him if he didn't want to talk. He doesn't give a shit. He is the most accountable guy. He told me one time, like, hey, they pay me a lot of money. I'm very proud of this organization. I want to represent it. And I feel it's my, as one of the leaders on this team, I should be speaking after games, whether we win or lose. I think it's important. There's just something so refreshing and accountable about him. Just a great guy. And, man, what a hockey player. For a guy who's not necessarily the most physically gifted, he's fast and he can shoot the puck. He has just turned himself into such of a great all-around player, and it's more hard work than anything, Joe. I mean, the guy just works his tail off.
He goes to the net like I would. Just who cares? I'm coming.
Yeah. Oh, I love it when there's a recklessness to his game. Like,
I know, and he loves dogs. And in full disclosure, I had a huge stuttering problem when I was a kid, which is funny. Now I make my living, spewing BS around the country and the world. But yeah, I all my nicknames, I used to get bullied. Bullies, I hate the word bullied. I used to get picked on. Got picked on a ton, everything. And that, I mean, that's not really why. I mean, another reason why I love Rusty, but I really love his hockey. I love the Rusty Razor. He's my guy.
Great.
I remember on the Canadian broadcast of the 16 Cup, it was just, like one of those things where you're like, oh man, what a good guy. He was getting interviewed on the ice in San Jose, and he's sitting there wearing the Stanley Cup champs hat, and the broadcaster says, "What are you thinking about right now?" And he said, "I'm thinking about my pop who passed away recently. Me and my brothers growing up, he always bought the hat that of the team we played for. And he's like, and I'm just sitting here thinking, wearing this hat, Pop would love to wear this hat right now, and I was like, oh man, like that's awesome. So good guy. But yeah, who do you got next, Josh?
Very high on my list, a guy who was not a Stanley Cup champion, and in fact, he only had one real marquee season with the Penguins, but I don't care, because growing up in the late 80s, he was the kind of Penguin you loved. High on my list is downtown Robbie Brown. Who 49 goals in the 88-89 season. Used to do the windmill celebration, which aggravated everyone.
I love that one.
To the point that, of course, Ron Hextall once attacked him during a game. And just one of the most amusing characters in Penguins history. I know this from stories Phil Bourque has told me, which was in the book we worked on together. Back in those days, it was like 88, 89, didn't have cell phones then, but there was always a phone in the locker room. And in between periods during games, Robbie Brown, in front of his teammates, would very casually go to the phone and call his girlfriend at the time, Alyssa Milano, and the whole team could have their conversations. And he would literally, like, there was one game in Chicago, I think, he actually said, "Hey, babe, yeah, it's awesome. I got a goal and 2 assists already. You should have seen this pass Mario gave me for this tap in. It was unbelievable." And he's like, "All right, I love you, babe. I got to go." Third period. And the whole team was just kind of sitting there looking at it like, it's kind of weird. Robbie didn't care. Robbie was living the life. And the funny thing is, he came back to the Penguins a decade later and was like a defensive specialist after playing under Mike Keenan in Chicago for a couple of years. But he could just think the game, even though he was slow and kind of out of shape. He was a classic 80s Penguin.
That's such a great summer programming call. Robbie Brown is the best. I mean, that's and Melissa Milano, that's the Conn Smythe right there.
And I was, when he came back that 10 years later or whatever, I remember going to a game. He comes out for warm-ups with no helmet on. So this shows you the type of guy he is. He doesn't care. He was all bald. He still had his long hair, but it was all bald up top. And I was like, me and my brother are looking at him like, he just doesn't care. He doesn't give an F. Like, he's like, yep, I'm bald. Big deal. Deal with it.
The fact that he became a defensive specialist, though, it's incredible. Because he was so far from doing any. I mean, the 80s Penguins, no one played defense basically. But I mean, he was the last. He didn't even come back. He never went across the center red.
No, yeah. Oh no. No, I mean, that's why Bob Airey will tell you some stories having to be the left wing with Mario and Robbie. Like he literally did all the defensive work. I mean, and he knew he had to back then. Those guys just wanted to score. I mean, that's what they were interested in, and they did it very well. But
that's
Robbie,
another guy not on my list. That's another guy. I mean, like I said, there's like 60 guys. I mean, I don't have Airey on my list, but how you gotta love Bibbs. I mean,
absolutely.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's like,
don't forget. Robbie scored the classic overtime, or he set up rather Borky for the overtime goal in Philadelphia back when the Penguins didn't win in the Spectrum. So he did have his postseason moments for the Penguins. Of course, Hextall tried to kill him later that series as well. So yeah, one of my all-time favorite. Great guy too.
Just it's a great. He's doing radio for Edmonton now.
Edmonton. Yep.
Oh yeah, that's right. I've seen him on there. Next on my list is. He wasn't probably, a media favorite, but Phil Kessel.
I knew where you were going.
Yeah, because he, just did his own thing. But I mean, a guy that puts hot dogs in the top of the Stanley Cup, and knows, the hot dog vendor very well in Toronto. We could talk about that a little bit, but also we were just talking about this at a family function, how amazing it was that he was registered. He, got his name got shown in the paper of how many votes he got for president in 2016.
I voted for him.
Did you?
You did?
Write-in candidate. Was he on the ballot in Pennsylvania?
No. He wasn't on the ballot, but so many write-in people in Pittsburgh wrote Phil Kessel that it showed up in the results.
He was my choice in 16, and of course the Rusty Razor as VP. And then in 2020, it was Rusty VP or Rusty as president, and Jake the Snake one bullet away. So we'll see who's on. We'll see who's with Rusty in November. I don't know. Jake is no longer on the ticket.
No, Phil. Listen, Phil Kessel, who was here 4 seasons. For a player who was only here 4 seasons, you talk about a legitimate folk hero. Like he really was and still is. I mean, the city just took to him immediately. He kind of looks like a Pittsburgher, you know. He looks like the guy sitting in section 115 who likes to have a beverage or two. But in many ways, he was a classic Penguin. He didn't like playing defense, but he was just so ungodly talented. He was going to help you win games, and Phil was very aware of that mystique that had developed, and I think he enjoyed playing into it a little bit. And I know he really appreciated his time in Pittsburgh. I don't think there's any question about that.
Oh, there's I mean, after sitting Gino and Tanger, I don't think. I mean, I don't think there's a bigger ovation coming.
No,
Phil would ever come back and get honored. I mean,
no.
Phil's a legend. I have Phil number 15 on my list. Yeah, I mean, he's right there. I mean, I love him. I don't know if it's my turn. Is it? I don't know.
Yeah,
But my number 9 is, he's not an original Penguin by any means, but when he showed up, everything changed. We went from being the Clippers. Well, Lemieux changed, but you guys know where I'm going. The Doctor, Paul Coffey. Everything changed when the Doctor came. Everything changed. Yeah. It was like, oh, wait, we're like a team now. We're like a team. We're an NHL team, and nothing funner than the Doctor just going up ice.
Oh,
that's my teenage years. Is just seeing him wheeling in when Lemieux was fast, and him, and then Robbie Brown sitting there like that. That's Penguini hockey there.
He was number 6 on my list, in fact, and I'm all over. Our lists are all over the place because we're overlapping so much. But Coffey, you're right. The Penguins kind of didn't become a big deal until he came along. And I still, if you ever get a chance to talk with Mike Lang, he just say, Mike, what's like your most memorable game that you ever called other than the Stanley Cups? The first game he will tell you was Paul Coffey's first game in Pittsburgh with the Penguins. The Penguins were losing to the Nordiques 4-0 in that game. They came back and won. And the way he skated that night, I mean, and he hadn't played in, he didn't have a training camp. He didn't play the first 2 months of the season. He just shows up cold in Pittsburgh, and he put on a show that game. Like the way he could skate, I could only compare it, I guess, to the way McJesus skates, the way he looks compared to everyone else. That's how Coffey looked compared to his peers. He was just literally faster than everyone and could skate circles around anybody. Just one of the most, in a franchise of wildly entertaining players, he's very close to the top of the list. Just the way he could take your breath away watching him play.
Yeah, he fits right into the we're kind of like the Lakers. Like almost every superstar has come through here at some point.
Oh yeah.
And the Doctor's one of them.
Oh
yeah. When everybody else was trying to get number 66 and 68 for my youth hockey teams, I always took 77. And I had a coach early, and I'm not. This is me trying to brag. It's local, youth hockey, and he puts me on defense, and I'm like, Coach, but I score. Why are you doing that? And he goes, I'm like 6 years old or something like that. He said, do you remember Paul Coffey, that number on your back? He said, he goes back and gets the puck first and doesn't have to wait for anybody to pass it to him. So I'm like, oh, okay, good point. He's like, so yeah, just take the puck and go. I'm like, all right.
And don't you think like everyone like, oh, Gretzky taught Messier, Gretzky taught Mario how to win in '87.
Oh,
I think that Mr. Coffey was a huge influence on everything with the Penguins about winning. It really changed everything changed. It was like the bad news Bears got Kelly Leak. It changed everything.
You're right. It's
swagger
funny.
Came.
One of my favorite Coffey stories, my neighbors growing up were like huge Penguins fans. They were like season ticket holders in the 60s and 70s types, right? And the Penguins used to practice in Mount Lebanon sometimes. It was open to the public. They went to the first practice, or one of the first practices after Coffey had been acquired. Coffey went nuts on Robbie Brown during a practice because Robbie decided to lay down on the bench. Like he looked like he was taking a nap during practice. And Coffey just went insane on him. The whole arena could hear it. He was just yelling, we're never going to win if this is how we act, blah, blah, blah. Because Coffey knew what it took. and that they needed him as a player too, but I think they needed his personality and just the respect that he commanded. So, and he is a giant in Penguins history. That remains, in my opinion, with all due respect to Ronnie Francis, I still think that's the most important trade in Penguins history.
Look at that. You had him 6. Yeah, that's great.
Josh, who do you got next?
Next on my list is somebody who was only in Pittsburgh, I think, 3 years. He's one of my favorite people in hockey. He once returned to the game or the same game when he had his jaw broken, came back anyway. Number 92 or number 22, Rick Tocchet, who we talk about Stevens being the best power forward in the game. Tocchet wasn't far behind. All the guy did was score 40 goals and put up 250 penalty minutes every year. One of my favorite people in the sport. And I know he's special because Joe loves him. And this was a guy who was once the Flyers captain, and Joe still loves him. I think that tells you something about Ricky Tocchet. And
he was they traded away an Italian boy, my grandma's favorite, even over Mario, Mark Recchi.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, and that's how much I love Touche. I mean, I love Tocchet. So Tocchet, Tocchet is on my list. I have Tocchet. I have Tocchet 14 because I had to put Recchi 13, or my grandmother would come down from heaven. But Tocchet this top 20, like all of them could be like number 8 or 7.
Right.
They're all it's just I mean the broken jaw game is all you need to know about Rick Tocchet.
That's right.
I love that clip of him, that famous clip of him just skating with no gloves on and that jaw protector, blood all over his jersey.
And he was pointing, he was saying, you want to fight? He was ready to fight more people after the jaw was broken. I mean, Rick just didn't care. I mean, he just wanted to win. And he was a winner too. If you go back and watch in the biggest games, he was one of those guys. He would always show up in the big moments, just tough as can be. And he's, by the way, also a very important figure in Penguins history as a coach. Just a great assistant coach. He really was. Completely commanded the respect of Crosby and Malkin. And he's another one of those guys. Everybody in hockey loves Rick Tocchet. I don't care if you're talking Mario, Gretzky, all the big names, they all love him. He's made quite a name for himself.
All-time leader by about 6 or 7 games in Gordie Howe hat tricks.
Yeah. And you could make a Hall of Fame argument for him. I mean, he's over 400 goals, one of the all-time penalty minute leaders.
I mean, I am. I'm starting this season because now that Roenick's in. Because when Roenick wasn't in yet, it's kind of hard to, as much as I love Tocchet, it's like, well, you got to put Roenick in
going to be in there first.
Another former Flyer. But Tocchet, I just love how Tocchet has all of his cups with the Penguins too.
Oh yeah,
salt in the wound.
And one thing about Tocchet,
it'd be like if Rusty would go. Well, I mean, I can't think of whoever. I don't know now.
It was one of my favorite Tocchet stories. I think it was the 96-97 season. Penguins were playing the Bruins when Rick was playing with Boston. Then, the big brawl erupted, and the Bruins all went after Mario, of course. And Tocchet was on the ice, and Tocchet actually pulled Mario down and just laid on him. He didn't want anybody to hurt him. He always had his back, even after he left. And I think I've told the story in this podcast. The time the Rangers were taking runs at him, Tocchet went up to Messier, said, "Hey, Mess, I respect you. Anybody else touches Mario, I'm going to kill you." And he skated away. And Messier looked at the bench, gives one of these. So that was it. So Tocchet, a very loyal soldier, Rick Tocchet.
And we talk, we always talk about our power forward. I mean, I always talk about power forwards. And Rick, epitome of power forward, but Rick fought the goons too. Like yes. Rick wasn't like, I'm taking, in those days when there was 5 goons, there was 5 tough guys in every team, but your best power forward kind of only stayed in the class by himself and only fought that in the classy guys. Tocchet went after everybody.
And he didn't really lose any fights. Nobody wanted to fight him.
No.
I mean, he's one of those guys. A very tough customer.
he's like Ruby, my dog. Tougher than the $3 Waffle House steak.
Well, your grandmother will be happy with my next pick on my list. It is Mark Recchi.
The wrecking ball.
You gotta love the wrecking ball. That iconic goal that he scored against the Bruins. Shooting off of his off foot. I remember when news broke that he signed with us right after we drafted Sid. Like me and my buddy were like, we're winning the Stanley Cup. And just love the wrecking ball. And I hate that he was traded, but speaking of Tocchet, like an argument be made. I don't know if we win the cup if you don't make that trade. So.
That's just a great point. But the other, plus Shell Samuelson played incredible hockey for us. I don't know if we win without Shell. Forget Tocchet. Shell was incredible. Yeah, it's funny because now today, hey, I'm one of the biggest guys. Don't trade him. I love don't trade Rusty But think about it. They traded Recchi. They traded Coffee. Guys in our top 10. They just traded them.
Hall of Fame, no doubt Hall of Famers. These weren't even Hall of Fame. These are like top tier Hall of Famers. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's true. But Recchi, when I think of Recchi, I always go back to the spring of '91 and the way he played in those playoffs. He put up Conn Smythe numbers. Wasn't going to win it because of 66. Might have been number 2 on the list. He was incredible that spring, and the goal he scored against the Bruins in Game 6 when the game was tied at 3, easily one of the top 5 biggest goals in Penguins history, in my opinion. He was clutch, and he's a great story. He's an undersized guy who was like 5'8", always had that chip on his shoulder that always pushed him, and just a hockey genius on the ice. His IQ was off the charts. He's an all-time great Penguin, an all-time great hockey player. You look at the numbers he put up, the longevity that he had, played into his 40s. Great player.
Yeah. Who do you have, Joe, next on your list?
My number 10, favorite all time, 2 cups, and now I'm going to go see him in Anaheim. I'm going to make a pilgrimage to say hello to the great Brian Dumoulin.
Very nice.
I love him as a dude. I thought he was a quintessential Penguin. I thought he could be the next captain. I remember when I thought it was kind of a little bit of a cheap shot when he went in with his ankle, and he's never the same.
Yeah.
And I thought he made that team. They don't win too. I don't know what they do, but I'm gonna make that big statement because they did have Sid Gino, but he was their best defenseman for those 2 cups.
Dumoulin in his prime may have been the best defensive defenseman in Penguins history. He's on the list. For sure. They certainly don't win the cup in 17 without him.
No.
What he did in that postseason without Letang, he was spectacular. He also scored a goal, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't he score the first goal in Game 6 in San Jose, I think? And I asked him about it. I said, I didn't know you were an offensive dynamo. He looked at me and said, I only score when it matters. A great guy.
You would know probably more than me. Well, you would know, Josh. Hasn't he won like at every level? Like he won in high school, he won in college. Like he knew how to handle himself in Stanley Cup parades. I just think he's a great dude. I just think he's a rock. He's a great human being.
When the Penguins made the Phil Kessel trade, Jim Rutherford made that trade with then interim general manager in Toronto, Kyle Dubas, and Dubas asked for Brian Dumoulin in that trade. And Jim Rutherford said, no, I will give you Scott Harrington if that's okay. And Dubas finally relented. And Jim made the right choice. Remember, he drafted Dumoulin in Carolina. He knew how good he was. It's a shame the injury kind of cut into his prime years. But a very, very important player for the Penguins. That's a great choice. I have just a lot of respect for him. And, playing with Chris Letang for years could not have been easy. Like I love Tanger, but he's a hard guy to play with. And one time in the playoffs, I said to Dumoulin, Dumo, could I maybe write a book with you, just a whole book on what it's like to play with Tanger, and you can just tell me stories? He looks at me, he goes, Christ. Then he just walks away. It had to be an adventure, but you had to have the straight man, right? You have to have the straight man sometimes with the comedian. He was the straight man playing with Chris, who was just doing his stuff all over the ice.
Josh, you could write a book about me watching Chris Letang for 10 years.
Yeah, I love Dumo.
You can write a book about my dad talking about me watching Chris Letang for 10
years. I love Dumoulin, and a huge piece of we hated to see it was Jordan Stahl, right? That was where we got him, right, in that trade.
Yeah,
the draft pick, and
Stahl to Carolina for Dumoulin, Brandon Sutter, and the draft pick that became Derek Pouliot, who did not make my list.
Oh yeah, shocking.
I think he made High Times top 100 hockey players.
Bet he did.
Who's next on your list, Josh?
Next on my list, we're gonna stay on the defenseman theme. The linebacker on skates, an all-time fan favorite in Pittsburgh, number 5, Ulf Samuelsson. When I think of Ulfie, I just think of the wars with Cam Neely. They were great to watch, and ultimately Ulfie won the wars because he's got 2 Stanley Cup rings. Cam Neely has 0, and man, it's hard to overestimate the appeal that Ulf had in Pittsburgh in those years, even though the Penguins, when we think of them, we think offense, we think talent. Ulf kind of played the game like a Steeler, and Pittsburgh still appreciates that kind of an attitude. Ulf was a rock star in the 90s, one of my all-time favorites.
Jack Lambert on skates.
Yes.
Every now and then I still pay for the Ulf Samuelsson wars. My great friend Bill. Sometimes if he's just in a mood, he just wants to bring that up, and somehow it's all my fault. Then Ulf has 2 rings.
I always thought, oh boy, we get this podcast going. Maybe Bill will come on, wants to talk some hockey. And then,
well, whatever you do, just don't bring up Ulf. He will, though. He will if he comes on. He'll come on, and then he'll bring it up, and then it'll be a shouting match for an hour.
I mean, I can't. His knee did certainly hit Cam Neely's knee, that's for sure. But you gotta love. I mean, back then, that's how you played hockey. And that's here in '91. They were punishing their defensemen too. Like the Penguins were hitting, and I think Ulf was kind of the ringleader of that. And then he scored the big goal in Game 5. He scored the first goal in '91, Game 6.
Game 6
of the first Penguin Stanley Cup. He was the goal scorer
right there from way downtown.
Now you're right, Corey. Bob Airy told me one time, he said, God, the things I did to Ray Bourque in that series, I kind of feel guilty. I mean, I should have been suspended like 10 different times.
And it's not like Neely would, it could have went the other way easily. That's why it always makes me feel weirded out. I hate knee to knees over anything. I think headshots are part of the game. Knee to knees you're going after someone's career it could just as easily, been, it's like they ran into each other. It could have been Neely that skated away and Alfie in rehab for 5 years. You never knew what was going to happen there, but just what a warrior that dude. Yeah. And him and Shell, the Samuelsson brothers, probably the best combo defensive pair we've ever had in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and Shell Samuelsson was really good. I mean, he was one of those guys. Mario hated playing against him. In fact, I think it's one of the reasons the Penguins got him. I think 66 is like, I don't want to play against this guy. This guy's got a longer reach than me. I don't want to have to play against this guy anymore. Nah, they were both, for a team that never had much defensive conscience. Those two both really did, and they made quite a difference.
Yeah. Next on my list is Chris Letang, which I know Joe probably isn't on your list.
I have to. It's such a love-hate. It's such a love-hate. I have Letang 16. I love that. That's the thing. That's how much I love Tanger. I hate the way he plays sometimes. That's why it's a roller coaster. And when he
understands that.
I mean, his first 10 games up, I'm like, oh my God, how amazing he scores that huge goal in overtime. And I mean, I just did not like his contract for not playing defense. That was my biggest thing with him. Like, hey, I love but it's $7 million a year, whatever he's making, when it was a lot of money. It's like, dude, you got to play some. You can't have your head in your ass half the time.
If he had a high hockey IQ, he'd be Bobby Orr. Like, he has that kind of physical talent. He really does.
Yeah.
Like he's different than anyone else physically. I will say he was at his very best in 2016. During that postseason, he was incredible, playing 30 minutes a night like it was nothing. He's an all-time great Penguin. He is polarizing. He is maddening. Half of the fan base gets pissed at me every time I write nice things about him. The other half is like, you hate Letang. Like, no, I don't. I try to call it like I see it with him, which is not easy because he's just a bizarre player. He's
makes exciting. The puck is in the net one way or the other. It's in your net or our net. You never know. It's,
that's Chris. But you cannot deny his impact over the years, nor can you deny his loyalty to the franchise. He could have left. He could have left a number of times. He loves it here, and it'll be interesting to see how the final few years of his career go. I'm not sure what direction they're going to go, and you never know with him. But you cannot deny the entertainment value that he has always brought to the rink.
Well, I think Letang is better defensively than he gets credit for when he's playing defense.
Yes.
When he's not up ice making terrible pinches.
Yes.
Or just bonehead passes in his zone, like not paying attention, listless, but when he's on it, when he's zoned in on playing defense in a corner, he's an excellent defenseman.
He's a great one-on-one defender
about him. And I thought this season, until he went haywire, I thought he was great this year.
Oh, the first half. Oh,
yeah.
Through January, he was unbelievably good. He really was. I thought he was having one of his best seasons.
Me too.
He was also better on the power play than Karlsson in the first half of the season, in my opinion. What happened to him in the last 2 months, I don't know, but that's Chris. I mean, you never really know what you're going to get with him. But you look at his career on the whole, and the Penguins don't win as much as they did if they don't have him.
And he's a great Penguin. That's why he's on my list. But I will say this though. If he was just a little better on the power play, that's it. That's the biggest crime against him. Is he's this offensive guy and he stinks on the power play.
I know, it's never made any sense. I know.
So frustrating. And Joe, your comment on how you have the love-hate relationship with, I'm sure Chris, if you're listening, which I'm sure he is, that's what he does in this offseason. But if he ever comes on the show, he probably understands, because that's probably how every coach has ever felt about him. You know what I mean? Like, one game Sullivan's like, like,
I know for a fact Mike Sullivan loves Chris and respects him. I know he drives him crazy. I love anytime Chris makes a mistake, I always look immediately to the bench to look at Sullivan, and you can see his face is turning red. It's hilarious. And whoever's coaching the defenseman, the Reardon or Jacques Martin or Gonjar, Sullivan would always just immediately look at him for like 10 seconds. You could tell he was communicating something to him. Yeah, he's not a fun guy to coach, I don't think, but you'd still like to have him.
And when he was so young, when we still had like Orpik and Scuderi and Gill, the guys that played defense, he was just so great to have and so fun to have. It was like just like kind of like a Cale Makar, not Cale Makar, but just with that speed and grace and the ability just to run the table. I mean, I really love Letang.
Oh yeah.
Like I said, he just drives me crazy because I'm trying to win games here.
Yep. Who do you got next, Joe?
Number 11. Then I think my list is almost done because we've talked about everybody. At number 11, I have it's almost like just a favorite hockey player of all time, and I was yelled out by the Maven by saying I think he's underrated. Is the great Brian Trottier. Yeah. I loved him when he was an Islander. It's almost more like an Islander. I love Trottier. And he became a Penguin. It was just like it's like a dream phase. We got Paul Coffey and we got Brian Trottier. Trottier's Yager center, and he's still excited to win cups. He's he's a great dude. I've pleasure hanging out. I love Trottier. He's Brian freaking Trottier. He's number 11 on my list. I just love Trottier.
Yeah, he made my list as well. I always appreciated the childlike enthusiasm he had. Like, the guy had already won 4 rings. He's already going to be in the Hall of Fame. And when they won the cup, he was happier than anyone. You could just tell it was like in his blood. He needed the Stanley Cup. Like, he craved it. Just the ultimate winner. And probably, I think, guys, one of the most underrated players in the history of the sport. I mean, really, I think he was the last guy to win a scoring title until Gretzky and Lemieux and Yager won all of them for the next 20 plus years. He scored over 500 goals, a great all-time player. What a competitor. I mean, he would do anything to win. Play defense, win face-off, slash the shit out of you. He didn't care. He would just do whatever it took. Just an unbelievable leader.
He was rookie of the year. I mean, yeah, he
Yeah.
was the number one center on the greatest dynasty really
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And
That tells you something. Huh?
I've told this story now, I think at least once on this, but yeah, because we had the great Stan Fischler, the Maven. He's like 100 now. He's been covering hockey since before World War II.
Right.
And obviously, Josh, and I go, we'd have had him on Puck Off. I go, why is Brian Trottier overrated? Why is he underrated? And he literally screamed at me, this little guy, who underrates Brian Trottier?
I think a lot of people do, though.
And I'm like, I don't see him to me, he's pushing on one of the top 10 greatest players of all time.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. He better be in your top 20 list at least. He should be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's he and he's great.
But I'm sorry to cut you off, Corey, but don't you think that he's really not mentioned in that?
Yeah, no,
in the not the Holy Trinity and then Sid and then Ov, he's not mentioned the Beliveau, that kind of that 8, 9, 10. He's not, and I think he's got to be mentioned in there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and he has, I think he has the record for most points in a period.
It sounds right.
Like something like 6 points in a period or something like that.
Yeah, he was.
He's just, we don't think of him, especially as Penguin fans, as being this super offensively gifted player. But he's an all-time great in the NHL.
Period. And I think it says something about him that he came to Pittsburgh and very willingly accepted a bottom 6 role. Something Derek Brassard wouldn't do, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But Brian Trottier would do it, right? He didn't have an ego in that way. He's like, all right, I'm past my prime. They got Lemieux and Francis. That's fine. I'm just going to be a shutdown center, and I'll score a big goal here and there and kill penalties, and that'll be that.
Just think about that, though. At the time he came, Ronnie and Mario hadn't won anything, and he has 4 rings.
Yeah.
Brassard comes to town. He's never done anything. And Sid and Gino have 3 rings.
Right. I think that tells you something about Derek Brassard. I think it tells you something about Brian Trottier.
I mean, right? I mean, that's why if you wait even make a list, number 1 hated Penguin ever for me.
Yeah.
Not even close. Are you up, sir, Mr. Corey?
Yeah, I think I'll go next. This is where I start to get into my not so much necessarily greatest Penguins of all time, but Marcus Naslund.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And I still will never get over that trade, because I had a Marcus Naslund poster. I loved Marcus Naslund, and then we trade him, and I kept the poster up because I'm like, I'm not taking him down. And he goes on to Vancouver, scores almost 400 goals for Vancouver, and we get Stoyanov in return, who finished his NHL career. I had to look it up today just to make sure. 2 goals and 4 assists. That was his NHL career. But I love.
He lost a couple fights. Don't forget that.
He got his ass kicked in a playoff game. I still see the blood over his face.
Yeah, it's just one of the most lopsided trades, probably one of the more lopsided trades in NHL history.
It is. It is. It's noted.
And I don't know if Naslund would have become Naslund if he stayed in Pittsburgh. I mean, he got the opportunity to be the guy in Vancouver. Great player though, and he had little glimpses when he was in Pittsburgh. You could see the talent for sure. There were just too many great forwards at the time for him to really get the ice time that he deserved. But he was a special one.
Yeah, love him. Who do you have next, Joe?
Go ahead, Josh.
I'm going to cut you guys off because I'm going to have somebody next on my list that you both love. Never won a cup in Pittsburgh, but for a hockey snob, it didn't get any better than watching Alexei Kovalev play hockey. I loved Kovy. I mean, the guy was such of an artist on the ice. He might be, in terms of pure talent, maybe top 10 all time. I
don't think there's a debate. I think that's fact.
The skating, the stick handling, the shot, that guy could do anything, and he could play the point on the power play too. What a hockey player he was.
He had the witch gene, the gene I love. He had the witch gene. Yeah, he's literally he's in my top 25. Like I said, I could put 60 guys. He's so on the cusp of making this top 20.
It's one of my favorite moments of, the 2011 season became, after the Winter Classic and Sid getting his concussion and then Gino blowing out his knee, that whole season became like, I was like, man, this season's just toast. And then when we got Kovalev back at the trade deadline, it was like this. It was just kind of like a little nostalgia tour for a moment. He scored the game winner in the first or second playoff game against Tampa. Or no, that wasn't. Yeah, that was Tampa. That was 2011. And it was just kind of like, felt like we were back in the old days. But yeah, Kovalev.
Yeah, I bet it was the big guy that said, "Get Covey back here."
Oh, yeah. Guaranteed it was. Oh, yeah.
And he's a rink rat too. He'd be at the rink all the time. So, but yeah, go ahead. Who you got, Joe?
No, so I have it's cool. I have four left. I have four left now that nobody's mentioned. That I at number 18, I have. It's almost like I love him more. I loved him as a player, but I just knowing him, and I love what he brings to the broadcast booth. I got the old 2-9er.
That was next on my list as well.
Yeah. Maybe doesn't make the list if not for just 20 years of greatness in the booth because of just so many guys. Sorry, Phil, not to knock your playing ability, but and plus he's like the Bob Airy. He just brings you back to when we kind of had no hope. And you just hear Mike Clyde going, the old 2-9er out there skating around.
You know what Borky was? And he still is, he's in his 60s now, and he's still like the coolest guy in the room, right? Yeah. And in the 90s, there was just something cool about him. He had the great mullet. He would give this, let's go on the river and party all summer. Then the next year, he wrote the poem, "Don't you think Mario deserves $4 million, Mr. DeBartolo?" He had a spitefulness about him that was so entertaining. My favorite Borky moment as a player, probably, the penalty kill the Penguins had in Game 4 in Minnesota when Troy Loney took the 5-minute major and they were only up a goal, and Borky drew a penalty when John Casey tripped him behind the net. And after the ref called the penalty, Borky looks at Casey and just kind of shrugged his shoulders and skated to the bench. One of the great role players in Penguins history. And listen, he's a guy, he wasn't drafted. He played in the minor leagues for like 5 or 6 years. He really worked his way to the NHL, and he became a very important player.
Hey, he played offense. He played as forward and defenseman. I mean,
that's right.
The old
20 goals a year. He played in a lot of different roles. Yeah. Oh, he was a great all-time Penguin.
He was fun. I loved his every time they show like he had like a pinball machine in his house, like KDKA. I'm like, this guy's awesome.
Oh yeah.
That's it. I recommend not. Anybody who hasn't read If These Walls Could Talk. I know, Josh, you won't know too much, but if you're a Penguin fan, you got to read that book. And
it's a great. If you're just a human being, it's a great book. It's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of emotion in that book.
By God, it's not for children, and that's how we wanted it because we had to tell the true story.
But like you said, with him playing in the minors, I thought it was a great testament. Like if any aspiring player that wants to make it to the NHL should read that book because it shows like the dedication, the commitment, everything you have to go through, the ups and downs.
Oh yeah.
Love Phil Bourque. Who's next on your list, Josh?
A little off the radar here, but a guy I've gotten to know a bit over the years, and a guy who meant a lot to the Penguins of the early 90s, even though he never got his name on the cup. Former Penguins center John Cullen. Was a heck of a hockey player. And if you go back and watch the victory celebration in Minnesota, I think it was both Stevens and Recchi in the post-game interviews that both said we wouldn't have won this cup without John Cullen. That's how important he was to just getting us to the playoffs before he was traded for Francis. And even though Cullen was traded to Hartford, in those 91 playoffs, he consistently made the trip to Pittsburgh and he was really close with Mark Recchi, and Recchi got him tickets in the friends and family section. He would actually sit in the arena while he was employed by the Hartford Whalers, was cheering for the Penguins in the playoffs. That's how much of a bond that was still there. He was a great player. And at the time of that trade, a lot of people thought EJ had actually won that trade when he was the Whalers GM because Zarley Zalapsky and John Cullen was like 4th in the league in scoring when that trade was made. He was a heck of a player, and he would later beat cancer. Just a great guy.
He's a great guy, and he carried the team when Mario was hurt that year.
Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm.
No,
he carried the team. It was kind of like when Keenan threw out all the Rangers and brought in the Chicago guys when they won the 94. It was almost like that. Like Cullen did all the hard work, and it's like you're not going to get this, the Jerome Bettis. He gets the ball for the touchdown. So because I thought we had 20, so now my number 20, and I'll go back and do my 19s. Number 20, I said last week, Chris Tamer knocked out Bob Probert. I mean, that's just. I mean, I don't really remember Battleship Bob Kelly, and so I don't really remember us ever having the toughest guy, and then we end up getting LaRock and Reeves or whatever. But I love Big George. But anyway, Tamer, just for that moment alone, is number 20 on my list.
Speaking about somebody making my list just for a moment, I'm not trying to rush it along here, but we got to Frank Pietrangelo.
I like it.
As a 6-year-old hockey fan sitting there for the first time going, how in the world did he do that? I mean, I tried to play in street hockey goalie. I tried to purposely give up rebounds to my left-hand side so that I could try and recreate that save. And then the shutout in Game 7 against the Devils.
People forget about that. Yes.
Yeah, so we don't win the cup there with him. Who do you got next, Josh?
I throw one name at the bottom of my list, but he's worth mentioning. One of my favorite Penguins from the mid to late 90s, a guy who could do it all. Number 82, Marty Straka.
Yep, next on my list.
Great player and a clutch player. He eliminated the Capitals in Game 6 in overtime on a Gonchar turnover. He scored on the breakaway. Then he beats Hasek in overtime in Game 6 to keep that series going. Could play the point on the power play really well. Could play center, could play wing. He was fast. He was just a Penguin. He wasn't really very good anywhere else. When he played with the Penguins, though, man, he was a good hockey player.
Yeah, literally like just probably the next guy after Kovalev, like number 23 on my list. Marty Straka, he's underrated. He was very good. He was very good for us. He just wasn't. We just had Mount Rushmore. We always have Hall of Famers. I'll make this quick. So my number 19, I got two power forwards. First of all, Billy Guerin.
Yeah,
I loved him forever. Team USA. He's played everywhere. He comes here. He helps us win the cup. He plays Big Brother the Sid. And then the other 19 I got is Scary Gary.
Ooh.
Gary Roberts. And for anything, just beating the piss out of Ben Eager. And Gary told me the story. Because he was Eager went and cheap shotted one of our guys, and in a brawl, he went and tried to sucker punch someone when they were down. And Gary's like, no. And he beat him so bad that Bobby Clark traded him to Chicago because he couldn't be a Flyer to get his ass kicked that bad. And then Gary told me at an event, Gary said that he called Ben Eager and say, I deserve your Stanley Cup ring because he stole one in Chicago.
I believe that was the game when he beat up Ben Eager when after the game, Eager was walking past the Penguins locker room and Mike Therrien told him off. No, he did. He with an array of expletives. So, yeah, the Penguins didn't think much of him. I will never forget the game Gary played. It was Game 1 against Ottawa in 2008. He came out, scored the first goal of the game, then he got ejected later in the game. I believe it was when Staggy said Gary Roberts is going back to his cage when he got thrown out of the game. He was unbelievable that game, a great playoff player. And no, he is one of those guys. He wasn't in Pittsburgh long, but, man, he made his impact felt. He really did. He was a very memorable presence.
Yeah, Gary Roberts, you felt like if he was going to score a goal on a breakaway and then fight the goalie afterwards, like just keep going right into the net and
that's right.
Take him out. I love this is another throwback, but he was part of that Marty Straka winner against Hasek, Robert Lang.
Yes.
Bobby
Lang, yeah.
Bobby Lang, he made the nice, on the forecheck in that Game 6 overtime winner in 2001. He, made the turnover, quick pass right out to Marty Straka for the goal. Big, the big check. He was a solid center for a couple of years there, and I think he won a gold medal with the Czech in '98 too.
I think he did.
Well, that's so funny. That whole line is right beneath my top 20. The Lang, Kovalev, Straka.
Yeah,
because that was a great line when Mario came back. Because it was Mario, Yuri, not Herdina,
Jan Herdina,
Jan Herdina, and Yogs for the top line.
That's right.
No, what a good team. Thinking about that, I mean,
anyway, went to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah,
they weren't bad. I got two names left on my list. I'll just give you both. stylistically, they were slightly different players, but I'm going to give you both of them. The first one, Big J Caulfield, who
Yes.
Mario's personal protector, a goon on the ice, an incredibly nice man off the ice. Every time I see Jay, we always shake hands, and I always need to put my hand in an ice bucket afterwards because I feel like it's going to break. Just a massive human being, the sweetest soul, like the nicest guy in the world. He knew he wasn't a great hockey player, though he knew what his job was, and he did it well. Very likable guy. And the other guy on the other end of the talent spectrum, this guy was only in Pittsburgh for 1 year, but he's probably one of my 5 favorite Penguins to watch ever. For that one season, Sergei Zubov was unbelievable, and I wish they wouldn't have traded him. I loved watching him play. The guy was a genius on the ice. I know it was only 1 year, so maybe that makes it an odd choice, but I always go back to those 95, 96 Penguins. I love that team. I loved watching them, and Zubov made them different. He was really special.
Yeah, Zubs was a killer. Both great choices. I mean, you got to love the big guy. Jay's just great. And Jay is great on the telestrator.
Yeah.
He's a great analyst.
He really is.
My last one on my list out there that Joe, you'll appreciate this. It wasn't a flyer, but I feel like you didn't really care for this guy. But Brent Johnson is on my list specifically because of him taking out Rick DiPietro. I can't imagine Joe being a huge DiPietro fan. He irked me, that guy. So I like Brent Johnson. I liked him as a backup. He was a good goalie and everything. But DiPietro, the moment he came into the league, thought he was hot stuff. He thought he was the best goaltender that ever played hockey. He loved handling the puck. He wanted to show off how good he was at handling it, but he actually caused a bunch of turnovers. So I loved it. And that was that ended DiPietro's career. And I'll never forget in the arena that night, the collective, the moment Johnny landed that punch on DiPietro.
Well, that was back in my newspaper days. I was working for the Trib at the time, and back then we had pretty hard deadlines, right? So my article, I think they won that game 3-0 or something. So my article's all done. I'm about ready to go to the locker room. I'm sitting there and I see Johnson knock him out. I'm like, oh Jesus, I got to rewrite this whole article now. This became the story, and of course, it was Flower laughing hysterically on the bench that caused the brawl in Long Island a week later because that so infuriated the Islanders that they called up half the team out of a Slapshot movie. To just beat the hell out of the Penguins the next week.
They kind of derailed Eric Tangrady's career.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That was that's really what the whole thing. That was a bad day in Penguin history.
It was. But Johnson was a great guy. He was the team DJ. You only ever heard Led Zeppelin in the locker room when you walked in because that's what he liked to play. Big Led Zeppelin guy, really likable guy. I mean, everybody loved Brent Johnson. And by the way, man, was he a good backup goalie to have around. He was really solid.
Yeah. I mean, obviously better than Casey DeSmith. Casey DeSmith couldn't throw that punch. You'd have to stand on the ladder to do it.
Joe, you got any others on your
list?
No,
that's it.
You throw out one more honorable mention. You got to have one more.
Honorable mention is so funny because I was thinking, put him on a spot. Honorable mention. You know who we didn't say? Honorable mention, Jake the Snake Gensel.
Yeah.
Love Jake.
Yeah, that's true.
And if I may quickly throw out one that was at the very bottom of my list, I love Jordan Stahl. Jordan he was 18 years old and he was already playing the game like a 30-year-old. They don't win the Cup in 2009 without him. Just a really good guy who's just, such of a mature presence for such of a young guy. And I always say, even though he was here 6 years, he's a giant in Penguins history.
Playing with Gino alone, he had 29 goals as a rookie.
As an 18-year-old.
He scores that shorthanded goal, game 6. I mean, that's you're going to go back to Detroit for all the marbles. Yeah, I mean, Jordan. It's kind of funny how he left I guess to play with his brother, but to go, he's a third line center there. It's like he's just going to stay there.
He was the best third line. He was the best third line center ever. That's what he was, and that's not a knock. He didn't really have the skill level to, be a guy who scored 30 a year. But I understand why he left. I don't think he would have left under any other circumstance. But he had already won a cup. He wanted to play with his brother and be a top 2 center. So I don't think anyone in Pittsburgh ever held that against him.
No,
I think he's still beloved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure he is.
But
I know,
except when
some
he
of-
owns Gino. Jesus, can you give him a
Oh
break?
my
I mean, he just owns him.
Destroys him. I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Love Jordan Stahl. I'm kind of ashamed I didn't have him on my list, but well, that's how we had other stuff planned, but this I should have known that.
We
this
could
would
have kept going for a while too. I know.
I know, yeah. If we didn't have a hard out, we would have been going for like a 4-hour podcast. Well, guys, this was fun.
Yeah, it was.
And we'll do some more stuff like this, and we're getting into
Summer programming's the best programming. This was fun. We could talk about these guys all day.
We're gonna have to talk about. It's easy to talk about the Tang and the power play and laugh. It's hard when it's like you're looking at 0 for 17.
We'll save that for November.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Joe. It's coming soon enough.
Everyone's going to the Hall of Fame in July. It's great.
Oh, all right. Well, that'll do it. That'll do it for us here on Two for Talking. Appreciate you guys. If you want to email the show, we will. Summer programming. I got all your emails teed up. So email the show number 2 for talking podcast at gmail.com, and we will talk to you guys later.